For decades, headlines have depicted a region in constant turmoil. But to truly understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we must look beyond the breaking news and delve into its deep, complex history. This isn't about simple answers, but about understanding intertwined narratives and the forces that shaped them. To grasp the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we must rewind to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a period marked by significant global shifts and the rise of powerful national movements. It's here that the seeds of the modern conflict were sown, not in ancient religious animosity, but in competing national aspirations. On one side, we see the emergence of Zionism, a political movement advocating for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in their ancestral land, often referred to as Zion or the Land of Israel. Driven by a long history of persecution, particularly in Europe, and the desire for self-determination, early Zionist pioneers began to immigrate to Ottoman-controlled Palestine. They envisioned a secure future, a place where Jews could live freely and govern themselves. This was seen as a return to their historic homeland, deeply rooted in religious and cultural tradition. Simultaneously, within the vast Ottoman Empire, Arab nationalism was gaining momentum. Arabs across the Middle East sought independence from Ottoman rule and the creation of their own sovereign states. In Palestine, the indigenous Arab population had lived on the land for centuries. They developed their own distinct identity, considering themselves the rightful inhabitants of this territory, which they also held sacred, particularly Jerusalem. Their desire was for self-rule and to preserve their way of life and culture in their homeland. These two burgeoning national movements, both rooted in deep connections to the same land, began to converge. Early interactions were not always confrontational, but as Jewish immigration increased and land purchases occurred, tensions inevitably arose. The Arab population, seeing their demographics and land ownership patterns shift, began to voice concerns about displacement and loss of control. World War I dramatically reshaped the geopolitical landscape. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which had ruled Palestine for centuries, left a power vacuum. Britain, a major victor in the war, took control of Palestine under a mandate from the League of Nations. This period, known as the British Mandate for Palestine, would prove pivotal and lay the groundwork for much of the future conflict. During the war, Britain made several conflicting promises that would haunt the region for decades. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 publicly expressed British support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, with the crucial caveat that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. This statement was celebrated by Zionists but viewed with deep suspicion and anger by the Arab population, who interpreted it as a betrayal of promises made for Arab independence in exchange for their support against the Ottomans. Throughout the British Mandate, 1920 to 1948, Jewish immigration continued, fueled by rising anti-Semitism in Europe, particularly after the horrors of the Holocaust. The Jewish population in Palestine grew significantly. Simultaneously, Arab nationalism intensified, leading to widespread protests, strikes, and sometimes violent clashes against both the British Mandate and the growing Jewish presence. The Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939 was a significant uprising against British rule and Zionist immigration. As World War II ended, the international community was faced with the urgent question of Palestine's future. The British, unable to reconcile the competing aspirations, turned the issue over to the newly formed United Nations. In November 1947, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 181, known as the Partition Plan. This plan proposed dividing Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states, with Jerusalem designated as an international city under UN administration. While accepted by the Zionist leadership, the partition plan was overwhelmingly rejected by the Arab states and the Palestinian Arab leadership. They viewed it as an unjust division of their land and a violation of their right to self-determination. The rejection of the partition plan immediately plunged Palestine into civil war. As the British Mandate officially ended on May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was declared. This declaration was immediately followed by the invasion of Palestine by armies from surrounding Arab states, marking the beginning of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, known to Israelis as the War of Independence and to Palestinians as the Nakba, or catastrophe. The war was fiercely fought. By its end in 1949, Israel had not only defended its existence but also expanded its borders beyond the UN Partition Plan's original allocation. The outcome had profound and lasting consequences. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians became refugees, fleeing or being expelled from their homes and lands, seeking refuge in neighboring countries and in what became the West Bank and Gaza Strip. For Palestinians, this displacement and dispossession remain a central grievance. The 1948 war did not bring peace, but an uneasy armistice. Over the next 2 decades, tensions continued to simmer, punctuated by border skirmishes and a growing Palestinian nationalist movement. The Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, was founded in 1964, aiming to establish a Palestinian state through armed struggle. The region erupted again in 1967 with the Six-Day War. In a rapid and decisive victory, Israel captured significant territories, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip from Jordan and Egypt respectively, the Golan Heights from Syria, and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. This war fundamentally altered the geography of the conflict and introduced the concept of occupied territories. The 1967 war introduced new dilemmas and deepened existing ones. For Israel, the newly acquired territories brought security gains but also the challenge of administering a large Palestinian population. For Palestinians, it meant living under military occupation, exacerbating their sense of dispossession and intensifying their struggle for self-determination. UN Security Council Resolution 242, adopted after the war, called for Israel's withdrawal from territories occupied in the conflict in exchange for peace and recognition, a framework that became the basis for future peace efforts. The decades that followed were marked by various attempts at peace and renewed cycles of violence. The Yom Kippur War in 1973 saw Arab states launch a surprise attack, ultimately leading to significant diplomatic shifts. This paved the way for the Camp David Accords in 1978, a landmark peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, followed by a peace treaty with Jordan in 1994. However, a comprehensive peace addressing the Palestinian issue remained elusive. In the late 1980s, a new phase of Palestinian resistance emerged, the First Intifada, 1987 to 1993. This was a largely non-violent uprising, characterized by civil disobedience, protests, and stone-throwing, aimed at ending the Israeli occupation. The Intifada brought the Palestinian struggle into global headlines and put immense pressure on both sides to seek a political solution. The Intifada, coupled with changing geopolitical dynamics, led to the historic Oslo Accords in the mid-1990s. These agreements, signed by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat, established the Palestinian Authority, PA, granting it limited self-rule in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. The accords also outlined a framework for a permanent peace agreement, based on a two-state solution. The dream was of a peaceful coexistence of 2 states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side. Yet, the optimism of Oslo proved fragile. Implementation of the accords was slow and difficult. Continued Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank, Palestinian disillusionment with the pace of peace, and a rise in extremism on both sides contributed to growing frustration. The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 by a Jewish extremist was a devastating blow to the peace process. The culmination of these frustrations erupted in 2000 with the Second Intifada, a far more violent uprising marked by suicide bombings by Palestinian militant groups and large-scale Israeli military responses. This period saw a significant escalation of violence and a breakdown of trust. Following the Second Intifada, Israel undertook major actions to enhance its security, including the construction of a security barrier, largely within the West Bank, which Israel maintains as for security, and Palestinians view as a land grab and an impediment to their statehood. In 2005, Israel unilaterally disengaged from the Gaza Strip, withdrawing its settlers and military presence. However, a blockade of Gaza was implemented by Israel and Egypt after Hamas, a militant Islamist group that rejects Israel's existence, won Palestinian legislative elections in 2006 and violently took control of Gaza in 2007. This further fragmented Palestinian governance and complicated the path to peace. Today, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains one of the world's most enduring and challenging geopolitical issues. The core issues that divide the two sides are deeply intertwined. Borders and settlements, the exact borders of a future Palestinian state, and the ongoing expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, are major obstacles. Jerusalem, both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital, a city sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Its status is intensely contested. Refugees. The fate of Palestinian refugees from 1948 and subsequent conflicts, and their right of return, is a central Palestinian demand. Security, Israel's need for security in a volatile region, and the security concerns of Palestinians living under occupation, are paramount for both sides. Mutual recognition, the fundamental recognition of each other's right to exist as sovereign entities, remains a complex challenge. Understanding this conflict means acknowledging that both Israelis and Palestinians have legitimate historical ties to the land, deeply held narratives, and profound grievances. It is a conflict of two national movements laying claim to the same territory, each seeing themselves as victims and fighting for their survival and self-determination. The path forward is fraught with challenges, requiring immense political will, empathy, and a genuine commitment to a just and lasting peace that respects the rights and aspirations of both peoples. This historical overview is merely a starting point. To truly understand, we must continue to learn, listen, and engage with the diverse.